What's up, everybody? MXGP 2021. I think it's finally time for me to really come in here and make a video on this now that we actually have gotten MXGP 2020 and, all that kind of stuff. And by the way, first of all, let me just say, make sure you have the notification bell turned on for my channel if you want to see all of my content. I actually tested this out for myself. Like straight up, if you don't have the all notifications bell turned on for my channel, you're going to get about half of my videos actually notified to you. I actually tested this myself. So, if you do want to actually, you subscribe expecting to get notified for all of my videos, just make sure that you have the actual notification bell hit and all notifications turned on. It really helps the channel out. I appreciate that. Very, very interesting thing that I said in one of my recent videos, and I'm going to go ahead and say it again right here, right off the bat, just so you guys can be thinking of this as I'm talking about it in this video, right? So what I said was, could you imagine a world where you had one of these MXGP milestone games, right? But it's like the track scaling was like the stock motocross tracks on Reflex, right? So just imagine this, just picture this, right? Okay, just for some of you boys that's really played Reflex, just try to think about this, how this would be in your head, right? And when I say track scaling, right, I'm talking about jump sizes, overall section length of sections and kind of how fast you're going in the game and just that overall track scaling, feeling of like how Reflex is on the stock motocross tracks of Reflex, okay? So just imagine, what I'm talking about, it's like, Razorback, Pine Top, Sandwick, right? All those kind of tracks, Armadillo Flats, right? All those legendary tracks. I mean, every single one of those stock tracks on Reflex is absolutely legendary, bro. But just imagine that kind of a track design, those kind of track designs and scaling, but inside of an MXGP game. Just imagine how amazing that would be. So those kind of jump sizes and those kind of corners and pre-made inside ruts and the terrain deformation of Reflex and that whole 9 yards, right? But it was inside of an MXGP game. So it was still the, the replica tracks of MXGP series, but it was just felt like the stock motocross tracks of Reflex. Just imagine that shit, dog. It would make these games so much better. I can't even explain it, dude. I really can't. So where I think a lot of you guys get caught up is you get this mentality of like, well, Spencer, it's a replica game, dude. They got to go in here and replicate the tracks. Of course they got to make the tracks 1-to-1 scaling. Of course they do, bro. I mean, it's a replica motocross game. They got to perfectly replicate the track, Spencer. Of course they got to make them 1-to-1 scaling, bro. Right? So a lot of you guys get caught up in that, and I feel like you get this mindset of like, you think that if they make it any bigger scaling than 1-to-1 scaling, it's going to somehow like not feel realistic anymore, right? Or it's going to not feel like a replica motocross game anymore. A lot of you guys have that weird-ass mentality, and I don't know why, because if you've ever played Reflex for any substantial amount of time, when you go in there on a track like Sandwick, right, which is not theoretically, technically a replica track, but it's a, come on, the name and everything, it is very, very heavily based upon, the real life Southwick track. I mean, Sandwick, Southwick, like, come on, bro. Like, it is heavily, inspired by, based upon a real life AMA motocross track. So when you're in there riding on Sandwick, it feels like you're riding on a Southwick track in Reflex. That's basically in a nutshell what it is. And that track does not feel unrealistic. Like, Sandwick on Reflex does not feel like an unrealistic track to me at all. But it is that more like, 1.2 to 1 or like 1.4 to 1 scaling. It's not that like perfectly 1 to 1 trying to exactly, get everything exactly replicated to scale like it would be in real life compared to the bike. It's not trying to be like that, but yet it still feels like a real life AMA motocross track. So you boys are going to have to get this idea out of your head that you have to have 1-to-1 scaling tracks to get a realistic kind of replica track design, because that's bullshit. It's bullshit. I'm just telling you, bro. And I don't know how much more of an example you can get than the way Sandwick feels on Reflex. It's basically a Southwick replica track that is not 1-to-1 scaling. It's got awesome-ass terrain deformation, pre-made ruts, somewhat bigger jumps on it than what would be on like an MXGP game, and bigger ruts than what would be on an MXGP game, and all that kind of stuff. And longer sections and not so tight and cramped like a lot of these MXGP games tracks are. And it feels awesome. And it feels realistic. And it feels like a real life sand track and all that kind of stuff. So my point being is like, just imagine if they did that. I think it is crucial. It is pivotal. Let me see if I can talk here. It is pivotal for this next MXGP 2021 game to have bigger than 1-to-1 scaling track designs. It is crucial, bro. Like, I mean, even the free ride compound on MXGP Pro and the Supercross track on that and stuff, that is way better than the little shitty ass tracks that you get on the free ride compound of this MXGP 2020, for sure. So, in a nutshell, that's about all they can really do, honestly, is make their scaling bigger, like it would be on a Reflex stock track. And for them to be able to do that, they're going to have to revamp their whole way that they're building their replica tracks, right? You're not just going to be able to take, all those same replica tracks that you had in the previous MXGP game and just, change them up a little bit and then throw them into the next game. You're not going to be able to do that. It's going to take a whole overhaul of the entire scaling, the way everything fits together on the track to make it like that. And that's probably why you haven't seen much of an advancement of the jump sizes and the skill gap and the scaling of everything, because for them to do that, it's going to take some work. They're not going to be able to just copy and paste the tracks that they had in the game before like they've been doing. But not only that, they have got to actually have a terrain deformation system in this next MXGP game. Without a doubt, 100%. Those are the two most important things. Bigger track scaling, like bigger roughness, bigger pre-made ruts in the corners, bigger jumps, longer lanes, not being so cramped down, trying to be super 1-to-1 scaling, hyper realistic in an arcade motocross game, right? All of that, and then an actual proper terrain deformation system that actually makes ruts that you can get into, and roughness that's not just a visual, makes it look like there's ruts on the track, but there's really not. I mean, there's hardly even a visual terrain deformation system on MXGP 2020. This is probably the least terrain deforming system that they've ever had in any of these MXGP games that I've ever seen before. I mean, it is like almost not even noticeable in this game. I don't know how you come out with a game in a AAA, motocross game in 2020 that doesn't even really have a terrain deformation system. I really don't know how that's even possible, but holy crap. But I think those are two of the most crucial things, right? It's like you cannot get so caught up. I'm telling you, bro, the whole point is, you're trying to make something realistic because you're making a replica game. I totally understand that. But at the same time, you're still playing an arcade motocross game. You idiots. Like, you still have to make it fun and skill gapped and have big enough jumps to where it feels like you're actually coming off of the ground, or there's some kind of a of a skill gap to the jumping. There's some kind of a substance to the tracks and the gameplay. But when you have these one-to-one scaling, small-ass track designs, no real pre-made ruts, they do have some inside berms in this game. You know, they kind of, they featured that in motocross games back in like MX versus ATV Untamed. You know, maybe even back to Unleashed. I don't really know when they first featured that like one individual inside berm. So you have like an outside berm and then an inside berm in every corner. Yeah, they featured that like, I don't know, 2 decades ago. Shit, I don't even know, bro. Right? Like this is very outdated. The graphics are amazing in this game, so it tricks your mind into thinking this shit's like next level. But when you actually look at the terrain itself, it is like literally fucking 15 years behind what newer AAA motocross games should be. I'm just telling you, bruh. It really, really is. So they've got to get into there where there's like some corners that have 3 or 4 pre-made inside ruts, or they've got a terrain deformation system that can actually make 3 or 4, you know, pre-made inside ruts and make the sand tracks get absolutely destroyed, like on Sandwick on Reflex. You know, the sand tracks in that game will make completely different kind of ruts than the hard pack, dry, blue groove tracks, and those will make completely different ruts than like the Texas-style red clay tracks. You know, you got to have that variation with your terrain deformation system, but holy crap, man. So either way, that's some of the biggest things I want to see them improve on from MXGP 2020 to MXGP 2021. I'm sure we're going to get the game. I really hope they really get in there and start improving on all their different, you know, like menu screens. I feel like MXGP 2021 or 2020 looks way too much like MXGP 2019 on the menu screens and stuff like that. They've got to go in there and overhaul all of that stuff. You know, they've got to go in there and continue to improve the track editor. I mean, that's a big thing. I don't know, man. It's just, but like, I know this video has kind of turned into just a scaling and terrain deformation talk video, but, you know, that's certainly not the only things they need to improve on with these MXGP games, but it's like, until they do that, it's just not going to be as fun of an experience. Like, you can have the greatest physics in the world, but if you do not have that proper jump, skill gap, roughness, pre-made rut designs in a motocross game, it's just not going to be all that fun. It's just not. I mean, yeah, they're starting to kind of get their physics to more of a feeling where you can lean forward and backwards a little more, and, you know, Supercross 3's physics and advanced upon a lot of stuff, and yeah, they're starting to get more of a feeling to the bike, but like, man alive, you've got to have more with these track designs, actually physically on the track, not just visually next-gen, eye candy type, you know, stuff on the tracks, right? You got to actually do more than that, make it affect the bike more, make roughness, like, there's just no reason for you to not have had more roughness going into these corners in these ruts, to be a little more sturdy and not like you just blow through the 10 ruts that you see in every corner. You just glide right over them. Like, that is the stupidest thing I've ever seen in my life. Like, yeah, you finally have one inside big-ass berm, but it don't even matter because you're basically hitting that big-ass inside berm exactly like you would the outside berm anyways. So it's just like, it really is. It just looks like a certain thing, but when you really play it, it's just really not, man. It's really not. So either way, that's some of the biggest things. I know I spent a lot of times talking about a couple of things, but it was just so important to get those points across for MXGP 2020. They've got to have more than just one free ride compound or playground or whatever you want to call it in their next MXGP game. I've been saying that forever, but here we are again. MXGP 2020, and still only one free ride compound. Like, holy shit, you've got to have more than that in a AAA dirt bike game. It's just like, you get so caught up in that. You go ride on that free ride track like once or twice, and then it's just like, okay, now I'm just stuck riding on these however many 12, you know, MXGP tracks in the game. That's all the content in the entire game. It's just like, holy shit, you've got to have more content than that. Put a couple of supercross tracks in this shit just for fun. Put, you know, 2 or 3 free ride tracks instead of just one. That way it gives you a little more stuff to ride on. Makes it feel more like an actually completed content to a AAA motocross game, you know? But either way, I'm just telling you, they're going to have to do something drastic with these track designs because you're starting to get so repetitive because you're riding on the same kind of tracks that you've been riding on for like 5 years now. You know, they're going to have to start actually really digging down and changing the way they do this scaling, or it's just going to continue to feel like the same thing over and over. They've done about all they can do as far as keeping it basically like it's always been, but trying to change it, you know, with the trying to make more small little micro blow right through them pre-made ruts and little bitty micro changes to the terrain, like trying to make it look more real and gives you a little bit more of a vibration on the track and shit. You know, they're doing everything they can without actually really doing anything to the tracks. Have you noticed that? It's like they're doing everything they can without actually digging into it and really doing something to it. Because once you start adding real pre-made ruts or a real terrain deformation system, it changes the entire game. And then you have to build other aspects of the game around that. So it's a challenge. It's, you know, it's something you got to work on. You got to really do. Seems like Milestone just always takes the easiest route. You know, they always take the less effort route. Right? That's why you still have the exact same kind of track scaling, because they don't want to go in there and try to make bigger track scaling, because that means they're going to have to totally build their replica tracks from the ground up again, and they're not going to be able to just copy and paste that shit. So they don't want to do that. You know, it all makes sense when you really think about why they haven't really changed these tracks very much. It all makes sense, bro. Oh, man. So either way, we'll see what they do, but that's my opinions on it. Some of the biggest things I want them to do and change, and good Lord, make the going over rollers more skill gapped and not so power robbing, high friction filling to the tracks. You know, you've got to add a little bit more of a speed filling when you actually do get going fast. And this game feels like you just hit this plateau of acceleration or plateau of speed that you get, and it doesn't feel like you're actually going any faster. Right? Like if you get on a long straightaway and you're just hauling ass all the way down the straightaway, it's like there's no real carrying actual momentum and really like feeling like you're actually hauling ass in this game. Like I'm going wide open through 4 corners and it feels like I'm going like, you know, 40 miles an hour at the most on the bike, or 30 miles an hour at the most. It's just like, you know, it's like anywhere between that. If you're on the gas for like 4 seconds, it don't matter if you're on the gas for 4 seconds or 10 seconds, it's going to be the same kind of speed filling. You see what I'm saying? Whereas like Reflex, there is such a big difference when you get to actually hauling ass and carrying momentum on a track. It's just a whole different level of skill gap to Reflex when you can actually start doing that and hauling ass, never letting off, hitting a terrain deformed rut on Sandwick. There's just no other feeling like it, man. This game just does not capture that carrying momentum, skill gap, super momentum flow, fluent motion through the corner. It just doesn't really capture any of that specific kind of skill gap at all. It's just so hard to explain it, man. But boy, they are struggling. Now that we've had this many of these games, it's just starting to get to that point where it's just getting more and more and more unacceptable, you know? It's just getting more and more and more like they got to do something drastic here. I'm telling you, if they do not do something drastic in that next MXGP game, it's going to be done for, bro. I mean, I think this shit's... There's a lot of people don't even want to buy the next MXGP game because of the way this game is. So, we'll see how it goes, but either way, appreciate you guys watching all the videos. Later, dudes.